Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Richard Clark. I'm a hypnotherapist and a spiritual practitioner. I'm a past life specialist and regression specialist and a future life progression specialist. And topics I'm going to talk about today are also very interesting about the way the world works and also my spiritual opinion on these things. So the first thing I'm going to talk about in this is conflict. So conflict, after separatism and divide and conquer, conflict is very common. Conflict is a struggle and clash for interest, opinion, or even principles. And conflict will be found in society as the basis of conflict may vary to be personal, racial, class, caste, political, and intentional. And international, because people's ideas that they don't believe different people should interfere with things. And the conflict may be emotional, intellectual, and theoretical, in which case academic recognition may or may not have a significant motive. So the conflict in a group follows a specific course. So group interaction in the first is disrupted by initial conflict within the group. And we have this when you think of group work. We can have different ideas of how we work in a business, in school, in groups. You think of it when you were at school, you had a group and there would be 4 of you in a group. And you'd think of, oh, you've got to do this idea, but there's always someone who disagrees with this or disagrees with that. In creative groups, this happens. That's why a lot of groups, rock groups and things don't last long, because someone's got creative differences or one wants to go solo because they don't believe they're being heard. This happens with film crews, this happens with many artistic endeavours. So but if we're going into religious ideals, conflict is, the idea is that nobody can come up with a universally accepted definition of conflict. Conflict can happen in many different ways. So we can see it in intergroup relations. Also, the idea is of envy. So someone could be envious of someone else or envious of someone else's groups of achievements, or view that group as a competition. Contempt, that could be the idea of someone has a contempt for someone, which includes emotions, or they feel someone has more of an advantage over someone. People also have pity as well, so some groups also with the conflict have pity over someone else, and they pity some people because they believe they're responsible for their own failures. And then admiration, which also can lead to jealousy as well, it depends on the person, admiration is where people see the idea of competence, and admiration is very rare because these two conditions of warmth and competence are rarely met. So the idea is that if we have admiration for people, which is actually a spiritual connection, because that's giving thanks and also seeing the greatness in people, is actually not very conducive to conflict, because if we admire people in the way they work, we wouldn't have a conflict with them. We would actually try and learn from them and actually use that to better ourselves. So types of conflict, there is content conflict, which occurs with people who have to deal with a certain issue. Relationship conflict, this is about what individuals disagree about one another, and this is not just in relationships in romantic, we're also talking about business relationships as well. So this is an awareness of frictions caused by frustrations, annoyance and irritations. A relationship conflict is comparable to affective and cognitive conflict as defined by many psychologists. Process conflict, people disagree about the group's approach to the task. So this is actually being spoken about recently, that some people, that they want to do something to prevent a war or prevent something, but the actual process of how is this going to work and what is the end goal causes conflict. And then people then get into the idea of, oh, you're a supporter of terrorism, or you're a supporter of this, or you are this, and it becomes in accusations. We also see this in group discussion, talk shows, how people may disagree with different things. But the idea is, one of the worst things I can't stand in talk shows sometimes is when someone's talking and then someone's talking over each other. So you can't actually hear, and it becomes a merge of noise. And then you can't hear what the person's talking about. Whereas actually, if people actually gave the respect people want, which actually most people don't do, is that they give someone a respect of saying, okay, they say, right, you have your point first, say your point, and then that person has a point. And what they don't, it's usually the person who's spoken first is like, oh, I don't agree with this, and they start arguing with it, but they actually don't have the courtesy to listen to their points. And sometimes when you're in a spiritual discourse, we have to understand that we have to be able to listen to our client. We have to listen to different things. Like as a hypnotherapist, one of the things I have to do is I have to listen mostly to what people say to me in a consultation, then write notes, then ask specific questions which gets more answers to actually help them. When I'm in actual hypnotherapy sessions, the client is actually the person who's dictating the session, so I have to be receptive to listen to them. I can't keep butting in. The only thing if I ever would interfere is that if I do believe the client is trying to use a false memory, and then just to make sure I clarify their information is correct and so forth. So sometimes, because clients do go quiet, so you have to say, excuse me, can you repeat that again? But generally it's like you let the client guide them, because it's their experience, it's their thing. We have to help them reframe and change the trigger. So it's very important. In past life as well, some people will believe what they see is the correct thing, but it's not always. It's sometimes their interpretation. Again, that's why it's good if you do work with people like myself, and when someone's in hypnosis, I can actually see in their head, so I can see what they're seeing, and my interpretation may be slightly different to theirs, but I have to also identify where their emotional intake is, or their reciprocation of that. Anyway, when we go into this, same with conflict, we also look at cognitive conflict during tasks, and comes from a difference in perspective and judgment. So we can have this is like, I believe you should do this to get somewhere, and someone will disagree, say, no, I think it's done this way. And sometimes it depends on the person. Sometimes you have to go, okay, I'll let them do that way, and then they learn from their mistake, or you actually agree with them and then see if it works. And again, or you can say, right, no, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm going to do it this way, and then your way could work or not. And again, if it doesn't work, you have to apologise and be grounded enough and open enough to say, I made a mistake. Or if it does work, you don't rub it in and go, oh, see, it works. You more or less say, you see, because the result is what you want. So many beliefs what propel groups towards conflict is superiority. This is an individual level core belief. And this is where people believe that their view in monoculturalism is the right view. And now sometimes some people see their cultural heritage as better than others. See, again, spirituality, we should be looking at that every culture has equal merit. So if someone believes, oh, well, we have the best culture and we have the best hair and we have the best music, that actually is a form of superiority. And I think actually when people do that, it's actually a sign of weakness, that they can't actually accept that everybody can have equal measure and equal worth in things. And it's actually something people don't look out for, but people, when they've been dominated by a race because they've been made to feel inferior, then when actually that inferior race do get some actual level of encouragement or actual belief, then they actually change from being not only they were the inferior, they actually now become superior in the way they behave. And actually it's quite dangerous, because the thing is, what they're doing, they're repeating their master's behaviour. Something to look out for. Injustice. People's idea of this is towards conflict, is the injustice of how they feel, of their disappointment and betrayal. Vulnerability as well is very much something about how people get into conflict, because if they feel vulnerable or have got anxiety, then they will react to that, causing conflict. Distrust because of previous actions, or actual distrust of that they just don't trust someone. Myself, I'm very much someone, I don't trust people until I know who they are and I get to know them more. Now, people think, oh, you should trust people more. No, not just through my previous experience. It's because people's motives are very individualistic and selfish in general. They're not selfless. They're selfish. That's how most people are. So we have to be wary of what people want. If people start showing you that they have got the similar ideals, then you can start, trusting them more. The other thing about conflict is helplessness. It's where people feel they actually have nowhere to help or where to go. And with that conflict escalation, it's the uncertainty and commitment with that. Are they committing to help or publicly help? Perception and misperception is also causes a lot of conflict. Most people do not want to be seen as negative. They do not want to be seen as a problem. So their perception and misperception is they have conflict with people because they don't like to be shown up. If they're bad, if they're distrustworthy, Nobody likes to be told they're crap. Nobody likes to be criticised. Constructive criticism is good, but if you're just completely criticised all the time, that will cause a conflict because people will feel bad. That's where some men, they may not abuse or beat up their wives or girlfriends, but what they do is they constantly criticise them, and then when they cut into conflict, they go, oh, well, she's mad, she's crazy. It's not. It's actually, and vice versa. You know, so they actually, it's that perception and misperception of people. Misattribution as well, very much something about how people are attributed to certain actions where they're not doing that. Misperceiving motivations. So again, I was talking about how people are misperceived their motivations of what they want to achieve. So there's many people I see in the world that I think have their motivations are purely capital gains, capital and money and fame, not for the intrinsic right to actually help people or intrusive. It's actually quite intrusive because what it does, it causes people to not trust them. Soft tactics and hard tactics. Some people believe you should be softer in tactics, be more subtle. And then other people believe you should have harder tactics, that they should show no mercy. Again, very much done in world wars. And sometimes this is where people's conditioning comes into, because they see that violence is the only way, whereas actually the idea is we should believe in conflict. We should see that we discuss and we come to peace treaties. Most peace treaties don't actually ever work though, unfortunately, because most people don't want peace. They like conflict because it causes chaos and it causes an easier form of control. It's quite strange how people think. The irritation and anger is also what causes a lot of conflict to escalate as well, because they get irritated or angry because they just keep seeing the same logical, which they should see logical discussion and it doesn't replace that, because emotional expression is also where people are so emotionally attached because they feel they're personally hurt, and they then come into conflict. The one thing also with conflict though is always there should be a resolution. Resolution is always important to this. So conflict mediation is where we try to mediate between two sets of groups, two sets of people, two sets of teams, two sets of businesses to actually make this work. And conflict mediation is very important. So it's arbitration, the mute point of where they need to get over, and they work that out. So that's where, from conflict, we look in spirituality, the idea is we should always be looking at how we can create mediation. And actually, if you think about it, when you actually meditate, that is where we actually, with meditation, it's to get away from the conflict of the world and to actually get the answers from within. And I think this is where sometimes I do believe that the world leaders need to mediate more instead of wanting to create conflict. They want to mediate more and actually come up with different perspectives from different people to come up with a resolution of peace. And I think most people don't want to do that, because whether they like it or not, war is money. Our freedom of speech is freedom of thought. We got to fight the power.